Above the Holy Land, the griffon vulture is perched on the edge of extinction. A future, now in human hands, one group of men, stands between these birds and the abyss. It's a crusade that will take everything they've got if they are to return what we call the King of Birds to its dominion over Israel's skies. Zoologist, Dr. Ofer Bahat. Endangered species specialist, Ohad Hatzofeh. And field researcher, Bill Woodley, are vital links in a growing chain of highly trained experts who have come together at a critical time in the fight to save the griffon vulture. Extending the entire length of Israel, it's a massive effort with only one goal: to help fragile wings soar again over this land. This is a flute made out of griffon vulture bones. It's 40 years old.
Were there many vultures nesting here then?
Yes, there were vultures around here, but they've disappeared. It's too bad. For Ofer Bahat, the connection to these birds runs deep.
At 17, I decided I wanted to be a scientist who helps to save birds of prey, and that's what I'm doing. In that respect, I think I'm pretty happy because this is the fulfillment of a childhood dream.
Years ago, thousands of raptors filled the skies. Today, only about 400 griffon vultures remain in Israel. The few that have survived are found in the north, mostly in the Golan Heights, and in the south, in the cliffs of the Judean Desert and the Negev. Griffon vultures rely entirely on the carcasses of dead animals. They forage in flocks to find food sources that are unpredictable and increasingly scarce.
הנשרים ייחודיים במובן הזה שהם בעצם The need for cooperation has resulted in a very complex social structure that goes far beyond the search for food, to nesting and roosting, and all the vultures in the area are familiar with one another, which helps maintain their cooperative system. This particular vulture may be found later in areas such as the Galilee, others in the Negev, or in the Judean Desert. They may later fly from here to Turkey in just one day. I'm 100% convinced that for some of these birds, flying such great distances strengthens their bonds with each other. Without this basis of familiarity, they simply can't survive.
No amount of bonding, however, can spare the vultures from all the risks posed by a country that has seen such rapid growth as modern Israel. Electrocution from power lines is one of the most obvious threats. Dozens of vultures have been electrocuted in the past 5 years.
How long has he been laying there already? He was electrocuted 2 weeks ago.
It doesn't take much for wings spanning up to 280 centimeters to make contact with high voltage lines. In recent years, environmental organizations and Israel's Electric Corporation have joined forces, fitting hundreds of electric poles with insulating protectors. A small but effective step that saves precious lives. Yet these scavengers are exposed to far more insidious threats. Ohad Hatzofeh hasn't slept for 4 nights. He's desperately trying to save what's left of the nesting colonies in the Golan Heights and the Galilee. In one day, almost the entire griffin population in the region is on the verge of being wiped out. Scores of endangered birds are dying. The reason? Poisoned bait, put out for wolves that had attacked cattle in the nearby hills. A crisis few ever expected grows by the hour as volunteers from all parts of the country converge to collect the dead birds and rescue chicks left starving in their nests. A painstaking and dangerous operation, Ohad must check nests high in the cliffs one by one. Dropping down the wall of the canyon, the team collects weak chicks, radio tagging those strong enough to remain.
Give me another half a meter, I'm sitting tight. Now I'm attaching a transmitter to him. If anything happens to the chick, it will help us understand where he's gone.
Checking inside the nests, Ohad discovers something chilling. In an attempt to provide their fledglings with much-needed calcium, it appears the vultures have mistaken bits of shiny metal and discarded ammunition for the bone fragments they often feed to them. The results could be fatal. The chicks are quickly transferred to the clinic of Dr. Yigal Horowitz.
You see, here in these two X-rays, we can see the metal, glass, and stones.
It's a problem Yigal sees all too often.
Suction over here. Suction, please, fast. Suction here all the time. Here's that long object we saw.
What is that? What is that?
Reed. Haven't you ever seen a piece of reed?
We're done here. Let's start sewing it up.
Thanks to Yigal's surgical skills, this chick has a chance. Bill, Yigal, and Asaf Kaplan know they must fight the problem at its source.
We're collecting bones to help the vultures with the calcium deficiency problem in the Golan Heights. In the recent history, the food source in the Golan was more small livestock, sheep and goats, and today it's more cattle. The bones from cows are way too big for a vulture to bring to the nest to give to its chick. We get small fragments of bone which we then disperse around carcasses where vultures are feeding in the Golan Heights, and they then hopefully bring the calcium or the bone fragments to the chicks in the nest.
The poisoning crisis in the Golan makes it clear just how vulnerable the vultures really are. A captive breeding program is the only way to sustain the wild population in the event of another disaster or sudden change. This is what the program is all about. 57 days after an egg is laid, a special moment arrives. Yigal Miller serves as a surrogate parent, helping the chick break free from its shell. Most eggs are collected from the captive breeding colony. In the wild, vultures lay only a single egg each year. If that egg is removed, they'll lay another. This tactic has doubled the number of eggs available to the breeding program. New eggs are placed in an incubator until they hatch. A critical stage in hatchling development is the first feeding. Yigal uses a vulture puppet so the chick will not imprint on a human. The chick cage faces the adult pen to maximize interaction and learning behaviors they'll need to survive in the wild. Adult vultures are devoted parents. Those unable to raise their own chicks readily adopt new hatchlings placed in their nest. At around 5 months, the grown chicks are transferred to acclimatization aviaries in the Carmel Hills, their release point for wild birds recovering from injury and those raised in captivity. But before any can fly the coop, they must get an identification tag.
You said only one with blue?
No, I can't remember how many there are.
שנתיים צריך להיות. Bill length is 51.0 millimeter.
Ohad explains that Bill must attach the transmitter in the right spot to prevent any problems for the bird during flight. The color of the vulture's collar tells the researchers its age. Brown indicates a 2-year-old bird. By 5, the collar is completely white. Orange eyes and an ivory-colored beak are another way to spot a fully mature vulture. Bill Woodley prefers a good dye job to keep track of his feathered friends.
I'm preparing a peroxide mix for dyeing the feather so that we can identify the bird with binoculars from a distance or from closer when the bird's in flight from the other birds that we've released or from wild birds. Primaries 6 and 7, blonde patch in the middle.
When we began this project in the late 80s, so many people said it was hopeless. At some point, I began to believe it too. Now, take a look. Here you are, standing and watching the vultures. Some of them have been free for 6 or 7 years already. This is the joy of life.
Release day. This is the moment of truth for the team. A chance to see if the birds will take to the sky. As the steel gate rises, large wings beat the air, and then freedom. For the vulture, the challenge to survive has only just begun.
And first he's got to learn to use the thermal air, how to fly in nature. In the cage he doesn't have room ready for real flight. He has to learn how to land in speed. Normally it takes him a week, 2 weeks, depending on the bird. And then once he's flying up in the sky, getting some altitude, he'll head to the north, to the high bar, and then from there they can spread to wherever.
Back on the Golan Heights, Ofer tracks the released birds.
Yes, the right wing. Look, it's an adult individual. How wonderful.
This bird is from the Carmel Hills. It was released there half a year ago or so.
Gamla in the Golan Heights is renewed primarily as an important historical and archaeological site, but it is no less important to nature conservation in general and to vultures and raptors in particular.
The Golan is one of the biggest nesting sites in the north, an ideal place for spotting vultures. It is now 3 a.m., feeding time in the Negev desert.
We finally reached the feeding station after walking about 1 kilometer. It's very cold out here, but as you can see, I'm sweating very hard. In this area of the arid Negev desert, there is a problem of food availability. There is food, but very few is available for the birds. So we put the carcasses here in order to sustain this population.
As Ofer gets in the blind, he knows the food will trigger a wild scramble for every scrap.
4 wolves have now arrived. See how they tear it apart. That's very important. They open up the carcasses, which then makes it easier for the vultures to gather the insides.
The wolves eat their fill, leaving before the heat of the day. A fox steals up to the carcasses. Her meal is swift and furtive. Morning is the time of the vultures. The fight over the carcasses has begun. Egyptian vultures nesting at a nearby cliff try to make the most of the opportunity, eating rapidly until the griffins arrive. Steppe eagles, flying from Russia to the African savanna, join the action. They too fill their crops and continue on their way. After all the diners have left the feeding station, Ofer is free to make house calls on the vulture colony he loves so much. About 16 pairs of vultures are nesting at this site. They mate throughout the year, even out of the breeding season, strengthening a bond that lasts a lifetime. Ofer believes children are the real key to the vulture's future. An apprentice program designed for young people like Sabrine, a Bedouin girl from a small school in the area, makes a big impression. Ofer and Sabrine discuss last year's Man and Vulture project. Sabrine's first encounter with the birds, who hold a special place in the Bedouin heart.
What do you feel you've learned from the project?
I've learned about vultures. I've learned many things I didn't know before.
We put out food for them regularly at the feeding station on one of the mountains. It's not far from here.
How many feeding stations are there in Sde Boker?
In the immediate vicinity of Sde Boker there are 2 stations, but we've got 20 of them all over the country. We can climb up there, along the ridge, and see inside the nest from there. This is a female we fitted with a transmitter in the south last year. Now she is nesting in the canyon. You can find the direction. When we came here, we saw the vultures nesting. There were already little chicks inside the nest. If you recall, we observed several feedings and arrivals.
באותה תקופה היו כבר גוזלים קטנים בקנים, את זוכרת. ממש קטנים, וראינו גם קצת האכלות ונשארים באים לקנים.
Ofer and Sabrine track the radio signals from the vulture's transmitter.
נמשך עד עכשיו, כמעט שנה.
But technological advances may soon open an exciting new window on the hidden life of the griffin vulture.
וקיבל עליו.
כן, אני גם רואה את זה. Today we released a griffon vulture that we mount video camera to its breast, and the camera transmit the picture back to us so we could tell where the vulture is flying, what he sees, and where it lands, and all the factors that may affect his choices. Yes, it is truly on the cliff of Galim Canyon. Do you get a good image?
Yes, we do.
Great! Congratulations.
Ohad and the team can barely contain their joy. This may very well be the first time anyone has ever witnessed images from a camera mounted on a griffon vulture. A timing mechanism is designed to release the camera in about 12 hours. Yet some people in this area do not need cameras to peer into the vulture's soul. Rajach Morisat from the Galilean village of Dir Hana is the last of the Bedouin masters of the traditional vulture flute. Today, Ofer brings him new bones to carve. The bones came from a vulture found in the desert. Ofer had to get permission from the Nature Reserves Authority to make this special delivery. Rajach's pleasure is obvious as he describes how he'll cut the bones, carefully drill the holes, each one a finger's length apart.
How old is this flute?
It's about 40 years old.
Whoa, 40 years!
היו פה נשרים על ה...
כן, בטח, היה נשרים.
So there used to be griffon vultures here on the cliff.
Sure, there were vultures here, lots of them. 30 or 40 years ago, they were still here in those caves you see, which are inaccessible. They live up there. That's nature, and it's fine. It's too bad they've disappeared. If they were here now, I would... There'd be a vulture in the sky and a vulture in the flute. He's still alive. His soul is singing and playing, as if the vulture were alive.
Oh